I spent most of high school online, not in the way people do now where they mean Instagram or games or doom scrolling. I mean really online. Headphones, doors shut, house quiet, clock creeping past midnight while I fall into places that felt like they weren't meant to be found. I'd get home, dump my backpack, eat what was ever left on the counter, and then boot up my laptop like a full-blown addict. By the time my parents were in bed, I was already somewhere else, being somebody else, seeing things no other teenager should see. Back then, that somewhere else was 4chan. It was chaos, but it was interesting chaos, you know? Every board felt like a different neighborhood, each with its own rules, tone, and level of danger. Some were stupid, some were funny, some were genuinely creative. Others were like wandering into an alley that you knew better than to linger in. I liked those rabbit holes though. I liked the mysteries, ARGs, strange videos, unexplained images, threads that promised answers and then delivered nothing but deeper questions. It felt like being part of a secret internet club, one that didn't care if you were actually ready for what you were about to see. They were going to show you anyway. Shovel Dog? One Guy, One Jar? Worm Gush? I say these video file names and I know some of you are about to cringe, and I know you remember them too. There was one board though, one I never posted on, I only lurked in. Everyone knew its reputation. You didn't stumble onto it by accident. It was infamous even by 4chan standards, a place where people whispered about in other threads, a place you only visit late at night when the house is dark and you told yourself you were just looking. It was where the worst stuff floated from the bottom of the web. Not illegal exactly, not always, but close enough to make your stomach turn. You could see murder, death, and find the worst confessions you can ever imagine. Stuff I honestly will never share anywhere, anonymous or otherwise. I'm only there out of curiosity, I told myself, anthropological interest. And I think that's a lie everybody used. One night while scrolling through that board, I saw a thread that didn't quite fit, and anybody that lurked back then knows what I'm talking about. This board, when something was posted that didn't fit like the rest of the threads, it would stand out. Lurkers would notice, so we all kind of gathered. The thumbnail stopped me cold. It wasn't shocking, it wasn't graphic. That was the problem. It was just a photo. Two girls standing outside somewhere that looked like a schoolyard playground or some kind of park. They're smiling at the camera, backpacks on, hair pulled back. 5th or 6th grade, I think, maybe. Younger than me by a few years. That alone was weird, but the description was stranger. It said, "Like what you see?" I clicked on it. The post attached to the image was disgusting. Not explicit in a pornographic way. Worse than that, it was a written description of things that the poster claimed he wanted to do to them. Violent, degrading, predatory fantasies that were written with this smug confidence, like he wanted an applause. This was common for this board, people showing up with the shock value stuff and wanting a standing ovation from the rats and shock troopers looking for that kind of jolt. My chest went tight reading it. I remember glancing at the door to my room, half expecting somebody else to be standing there, watching me read it. I always felt that way when I came across something weird, this vague sense of guilt. The responses were mixed. A lot of people were furious, calling him out, telling him to delete himself, saying he was sick, saying this crossed a line even for that board. Others were clearly trolling, egging him on just to be cruel. They said the mods had gone to bed and it was time to post the good stuff. A few posts were worse, not many, but enough to make it stick in my head, enough to make me close the tab instead of replying. There were people singing his praise, telling him to go for it, for lack of better words. I kept reminding myself it had to be shock bait, somebody trying to get a rise out of other people. That happened all the time, literally every day. On the next night, I saw the thread again. Same image, but a different title. This time there were more photos. Not many, but enough to know this person had real access to these girls directly. Different angles, but same girls, same age. The descriptions had now escalated. Still written fantasies, but no actual acts shown. But the fixation was undeniable. The poster was not pretending. He was not practicing. He was arguing with people, calling him out, mocking them, claiming he knew these girls, claiming they were special. Every comment only escalated the whole fiasco, so again, All I did was observe until the thread timed out. That night, I couldn't sleep. Was this man hurting them right fucking now? What kind of world had I now tapped into? After that, though, it became routine. Every night, sometime after midnight, the thread would appear. Sometimes it was the same images, sometimes new ones. Sometimes the title was bait, something vague meant to lure people in. Other times it was just straight up blunt and aggressive. The comments grew angrier, more desperate, people begging him to stop, others trying to track the images. A few claimed they were reporting him, though we all knew it was a bluff. This image board was truly anonymous, and if something went against the guidelines, the mods would just simply delete it. They didn't investigate things like this. They just swept it under the rug. The poster never really seemed worried. That was another clue that we were totally and utterly powerless. Weeks went by and I checked less boards. I stopped clicking into random threads, but always looking for that one. Part of me hoped it wouldn't be there anymore. Part of me was afraid of what it meant if it was. As long as that disgusting thread was there, I could rest knowing it was just a daydream. The worst realization came quietly one night as I stared at that familiar photo and felt something settle in my gut. This was not somebody reposting random images from Google, a theory many of us had been offering up. This was some kind of sicko taking images off a friend's account and pretending they were kids he knew. Creepy, ultimate trolling type behavior. This, however, was somebody who did in fact have access to those girls. The image in question was the girls on a couch, facing the other direction, and at the bottom of the picture was this little piece of paper, and the paper said,
"Hi, insert image board name. Don't they look tasty?"
Followed by a time and a date. This predator was proving he was really in the house with these girls with the timestamp. I felt in my heart that we were circling the drain at this point. It was like watching a shark closing in. Every night, I was finding myself looking, making sure it hadn't escalated, that it was still there, that it was just words on a page confined to a screen. But the posts kept coming, and the tone kept shifting from provocation to confession. The guy stopped pretending he was just trolling, and he started talking like somebody who had already crossed a line in his head. He then began referring to himself as a stepfather.
"What kind of stepfather would I be if I didn't properly train these girls for womanhood? Do you think they'll still call me by name, or will they still call me stepdaddy? The best part is having them sit in my lap every night before bed. No one, not even their mom, suspects a thing."
I couldn't believe it. Comments about being trusted, about having keys, about how easy it was to take photos without being noticed. Then one night, he just said it outright, claimed the girls lived under the same roof, claimed their mother was clueless, claiming the posting itself was part of the thrill, that the act of sharing them or having strangers see what he saw made him feel powerful, perverse, and generous. That was when this thread exploded. People were calling for this man's execution. The casual cruelty vanished. Even the trolls seemed uneasy now. People weren't just insulting him, they were pleading, telling him to stop, telling him to delete the images, begging him to get help, to walk away while he still could. A few users even tried to reason with him, spelling out exactly how bad this would end for everybody involved. He would respond back with lulls, further threats until the thread timed out, and then he vanished for the night. He called them buzzkills, said they didn't understand how far gone he already was. He said there was no rewind button for his mind, talked about courage, and not in this moral sense, but like he was psyching himself up for something inevitable, something he framed as destiny instead of a crime. Reading this felt like standing next to a firing line at a gun range. It was hard to keep my eyes open, hard to even pay attention. I remember at one point my hands were shaking on the keyboard, hitting all kinds of keys, remembering feeling stupid for being scared, and sitting safely in my own bedroom while this played out somewhere else, but it didn't feel distant at all. It felt immediate and very, very real. Then I got tagged in a comment one night, just before the thread timed out. I'd never even posted inside that creepy asshole's thread, never said a word. I didn't even have a consistent handle. Nobody did, just whatever the board assigned me that session, usually a random set of numbers, but Somebody replied to one of the frantic comments and tagged several anonymous IDs, including mine, with a single line. "If you're serious about stopping this, go here." It was a link to another thread, different board, totally hidden from prying eyes. Quieter and no shock images, no bait titles, just screenshots, timestamps, and people breaking down what little information they had. Somebody had archived the post before they were deleted. Someone else was comparing image compression artifacts. Another was speculating about time zones based about when the thread went live and when the guy went to sleep. They were even analyzing his speech and typing style through words and writing that he produced. Halfway down the thread was another link, and this one led to a chat room. I hesitated. It felt like crossing a line from observer to now participant, from doom scrolling to responsibility. But once I clicked in, there's no dramatic reveal, no manifesto, just a handful of usernames already talking, lines of text stacking up in front of me. There were maybe 10 of us at first. A guy who claimed to work IT support and knew basic networking. A woman who said she'd done moderation work on other platforms, understood the basic website tag-in and tag-out protocols. Somebody else who admitted they had no technical skills at all but was good at organizing information and keeping timelines straight. A few lurkers watching, just like I'd been. There was no leader and no head hero. That surprised me. It was just a collective of people that were sick of watching that guy threaten children. Everyday folks like you and me that were ready to put down their entire lives to stop this from happening. There was nervous humor, sure, people making dumb jokes to cut out the tension. Somebody joked about how none of us would be here if we had healthier hobbies. Somebody else called it the worst project group imaginable. And I'll admit it helped somehow. Made it feel human instead of apocalyptic. And it also fueled our morale and our camaraderie. We wanted to be there. We wanted to work together for this common goal. And the purpose was crystal clear. We were there to identify the poster, to figure out who he really was, where he was, and how to hand that information to somebody who could actually intervene. Nobody talked about revenge. Nobody talked about confronting him directly. The goal was simple: stop him. And the easiest way to do that would be to find out his identity, then hand it over to the police. So we started small, tracking post times, comparing language patterns, noting the way he referred to the girls, the consistency of his phrasing. Somebody pointed out the photos always seemed to be taken indoors, under similar lighting. Somebody else noticed a logo on the backpack in one of the images and started digging into various business brandings. Maybe there would be something local to clue us in. I felt energized now in a way that actually kind of scared me. This was no longer morbid curiosity, it was purpose. I'd gone from helplessly watching something horrible unfolding in front of me to being part of a group that believed, maybe naively, that we could interrupt, and that belief was intoxicating. Underneath all of it was this pressure, questions from my parents, my friends, realizations from the team about what could possibly and potentially happen to us. Because if we were wrong, we're wasting our time. But if we're right, every minute mattered. By the third night, we all understood the same grim truth at the same time. We weren't going to crack him on 4chan. Every theory about IP leaks, bad OPSEC, or accidental metadata collapsed under scrutiny. The post jumped to regions, time zones shifted. If there was a real location bleed, it was buried beneath layers of obfuscation, or worse, the anonymity was working exactly as it intended. The board was doing what it had always done, protecting monsters by accident. Meanwhile, his posts were escalating. Not in detail, he seemed to relish withholding now, but in confidence. He talked less about fantasy and more about inevitability, about waiting for the right moment, about how people like us didn't understand how easy it would be to cross that line once you've already stepped over it inside your head.
Their mom isn't going to be home this Friday. Maybe I can get them to fall asleep with me in the living room. We can all stay together under the blankets, get comfy. Maybe I'll put on a scary movie so they stay close, keep a hand on me. Little will they know.
We felt the clock ticking. The breakthrough didn't come from clever hacking or technical genius. It came from desperation. Someone in chat typed what we'd all been avoiding. We need him off 4chan. That was it. That was the move. If we couldn't trace him there, we'd lure him somewhere else that was actually traceable. somewhere permanence existed, somewhere with real accounts, real handles, and actual data. Reddit was our first suggestion. We moved instantly. Within hours, we'd spun up a subreddit, ugly, grimy, intentionally off-putting. It wasn't explicit, but it suggested the worst. Curated creepypasta, disturbing art, threads framing as confessions and dark thoughts. We created burner accounts, populated it until it looked lived in, rotten, a place he'd feel at home. We even created some DIY, home-cooked content that fell in line with his stuff, something to make him feel right at home even more. Then would come the hardest part, talking to him, and for some stupid reason, I volunteered. Back on his thread, I adopted a tone. I mirrored his language, complimented his honesty, told him I understood the thrill of sharing, of being seen out in the open. Every word tasted like ash, but I typed it anyway. I let him lead, let him think that he was in control.
Oh my, a man of culture. Have you actually tasted the fruit?
He asked me. Of course, wouldn't comment otherwise. A better question, how haven't you had a little taste yourself, with such delightful apples in your basket?
I know. I struggle to cross over and take the plunge. Soon though, that's all I can say.
We went on back and forth like that for 20 minutes, and I wanted to puke the entire time. When I mentioned the subreddit, I framed it as a gift. Less noise, less judgment, people who actually get it. He hesitated. You could feel it in the pacing of his replies, shorter sentences, longer pauses. He asked me questions about moderation, about rules, about who ran it, and I answered carefully, letting others in the chat feed me lines. We were so close it felt unreal. And then he vanished. No reply, no goodbye. He stopped replying, and the thread timed out within 15 minutes. Maybe he'd gone to bed and was thinking it over. Tomorrow we'd see a Reddit account pop up and this would all be worth it. But instead, a new post appeared. One last image. It wasn't shocking, it wasn't explicit, it was mundane. And that's what broke us. One of the girls was wearing a middle school gym shirt, big blocky letters, school name, year, current. It was wrinkled and partially obscured, but when we realized what it was that we were actually looking at, everybody jumped in to solve the puzzle. The chat room was quiet, then exploded with message after message, all caps framed with exclamation marks. We were freaking the fuck out, dude. I can't even properly express it. That was the crack in the dam. We fucking got him. We zoomed, cropped, enhanced, cross-referenced. Within an hour, somebody had the school's website open, class rosters, event photos, newsletters. It didn't take long. And then there the girls were, smiling in a group photo, a lot younger than what they looked like on that cursed board. We found the families next, and that part felt really weird, intrusive, almost dangerous. None of us really wanted to be the creep who cold contacted a parent with accusations pulled from the internet, so we didn't. Instead, we documented everything. Screenshots, archived threads, timelines, commentary explaining the pattern, the escalation, the claims of access. We wrote like we were building a case because I guess in a way, we were. Clear and clinical, impossible to misunderstand. And then somebody called the school. Not anonymously, calmly and carefully. We explained what we had, what we feared, and why time mattered. We didn't have the poster's identity, but we knew the names of the girls, and we were hoping they could backtrack from there. An administrator asked for the materials. We sent the portfolio to an official school email account, and after that, things moved fast. The school contacted the mother contacted the police. The police had already enough to act. The man, her boyfriend, was living in the home, exactly like he claimed. He was taken from work the next day, charged, booked, removed. The thread never came back. No manifesto, no retaliation, just silence. A complete vacuum where a potential pedophile had once existed. Weeks later, one of us found a local news blurb confirming an arrest. He was nowhere near any of us, but we got his first name, his mugshot. We got our guy, you know? I remember sitting back from the screen, heart pounding, feeling something that I did not expect. Relief, satisfaction. I'd done that, goddammit. What started as a sick curiosity, something I'd stumbled into while lurking too late at night, ended with a real-world consequence, actual protection, Proof that even in the worst corners of the internet, people could choose to act and make an actual difference. This was before the documentaries like Don't Mess with Cats, which I was also oddly involved with. This was before vigilante justice became content. Before anybody was clapping at a phone screen. We didn't feel like heroes. We just felt human. And I guess sometimes that's all you need. I'm from the Pennsylvania wilds. If you're not familiar, it covers nearly a quarter of the state, miles of dense hardwood forest, logging roads, state game lands, and towns so small they barely register on a map. It's rural in a way that feels older than the highways that are cutting through it. At night, it's black enough to swallow headlights whole. I've lived here my entire life. When I was a kid, one of my cousins told me there were weird people in these woods. Not hunters, not hikers. Weird people who only come out at night. Another cousin from the same area said something similar but claimed they were part of a cult and wore these strange masks. I looked into it years later. Of course, there's no records, no cult reports, nothing local that would back it up. I figured they had to be messing with me. Until last year. I left work for early that morning, just past 3. The hours feel suspended. No traffic, no movement. Just the road, the trees, pressing in tightly on both sides. And that particular morning was clear and dry. No fog, no rain, just me in the dark. I was driving a stretch of back road that runs between 2 heavy sections of forest when something stepped out of the woods on the right side. I slowed automatically, thinking deer. People had accidents out here all the time. But it wasn't shaped like a deer. My headlights washed the shoulder in that dull yellow light that lets you see just enough. The gravel, the grass, the lower trunks of trees, everything beyond that fades into black. Between 2 trees just off the road stood something tall and unnaturally thin. It was man-shaped, but only in shape. I can't describe it. It's like it was presenting itself as a man. Long limbs, lengthy like a stretched rubber toy. It was the same lightish brown-gray all over, almost like bark. For a second, I thought it might actually really be a person, but we were miles from anything. The thought then flashed through my mind. Is this guy naked out here? Then it raised its arm and waved. Slow and casual, but unmistakable. And that's when I got a really good look at its face. The eyes were dark, sunken and black. The mouth, or what I thought was the mouth, was nearly a foot long. It seemed to extend further down the face than it should have. Maybe it was shadows, it's hard to say. But it felt like a smile, and it matched that weird waving arm. The second I registered it, something in me shut down the curiosity. I snapped my eyes back to the road and slammed my foot on the gas. I did not look back. I refused to. By the time I reached work, I convinced myself it was a dead tree, a strange stump. Headlights can warp shapes and your brain will fill in the gaps. That explanation felt good enough for me. On my way home that afternoon, I pulled over near that area where I'd seen it, expecting to find that weird tree in particular and just laugh at myself. But there was no tree, just an abandoned, overgrown logging road branching off into the woods. You wouldn't notice it unless you were looking. Grass was growing thick down the center, brush reclaiming every single inch. Nothing that matched what I'd seen, and there were these really weird tracks out there, wandering in and out of the forest. Still, I forced myself to accept the trick of the light theory. It was more believable than the alternative. Months would pass, then late fall would roll in, leaves mostly down, the woods looking skeletal as they do. One evening, I was home listening to this paranormal podcast about something they called the Tall Whites. I had nearly tuned it out until the host mentioned the sighting happened in the next county over from me. A story came from a retired park ranger. About 20 years ago, while on patrol at night, he saw a tall, thin humanoid figure standing between trees along the forested road. Light brown or gray, extremely long limbs. He said it had small red eyes, but he'd shine a flashlight directly at it. An eye shine can distort color at night. He also mentioned what looked like a really long nose, or what he thought was a long nose. Perhaps a mouth that was hard to say. My stomach dropped immediately. The proportions that he described were nearly identical to the ones I saw. The stillness, the way it stood just inside the tree line, watching with its creepy big face. If what I saw was only headlights playing tricks, how did somebody describe almost the same exact thing 2 decades earlier? The differences were minor, but the shape, the height, the build, It was all a direct match. And the location, deep woods, back roads, places most people never travel at 3 a.m, reminded me of that missing 411 thing. I started thinking back about what my cousins had told me when I was a kid about those weird people off in the woods, masked figures. Maybe they'd seen something like that and tried to make sense of it the only way that kids can. Or maybe stories just grow up in places like this, and I think you see why. I haven't told many people about what I saw. It sounds ridiculous when I say it out loud. A tall gray brown man thing waving from between the trees at 3 a.m. I mean, come on. But I know what I saw was not a deer. It wasn't a stump, and it wasn't random. It lifted its arm. It acknowledged me. Now when I drive that stretch of road, I don't slow down for anything.